SEGA Bits presents SEGA Talk, a podcast talking all things SEGA! With your hosts, George and Barry.
Look, it's a giant talking egg. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the master here. So what?
Welcome to the 30th anniversary of Sonic T. Hedgehog. That could have gone better. I'm Barry, and with me is George.
The Freedom Fighter, George.
The Freedom Fighter, George. And we are talking about Sonic the Hedgehog Archie comics on this episode of SEGA Talk, episode 72. This is our first episode of Sonic's 30th anniversary month of June. Before we get into that, I do want to tell you guys we have like a 20-minute SEGA News Bits where we talk all about that big Sonic Central event that went on, so you can check that out. If you're like, oh, they're not talking about Sonic Rangers and all that. But we're jumping way back. Before Rangers, they were fighting for freedom. And you can fight for us over on Patreon. If you support us at any level, you get to your memories read out at the end of the episode. At other tiers, you get the episode like a week early. You get to pick episodes. This one is not a pick. This is our pick. But George, what was our last pick? What was that one? It was
Mad World.
What was it?
Literally last episode.
Yeah. Last episode was Mad World. And it's interesting because, you know, I've been saying for the past few episodes, there's always a little link between them. So the link I'm going to find, I think from now on, I'm going to try to find a connective tissue. So Mad World was very comic booky, kind of Sin City inspired. And we're talking about comic books on this episode. We're talking about Sonic the Hedgehog comic books, like I mentioned, specifically the mainline Archie comics. There are a ton of these. So many that the Guinness Book of World Records cites the Archie Sonic comics as the longest-running video game-inspired comic, and Archie claims that is the longest-running, continuously published, licensed comic series of all time, which is pretty insane. And I was like trying to think of other ones that might come close. I'm thinking maybe Walt Disney Comics, but from what I know about them, they switched publishers a lot. They would keep the numbers, but like they've been through maybe 4 or 5 publishers. But here with Archie, like kicking off with, what was it, like 1990... I actually don't think I have the number. Oh yeah, 1992 when they started working on them. Through to, man, what was it, 2017 or something when they ended? That is a hell of a long run. And they had nearly 300 mainline comics, plus specials, spin-offs, miniseries, and crossovers. And honestly, that's like a lot to cover. We're not covering all of that on this episode. We are only talking about the original 4-issue miniseries and the first 38 issues, which kind of encapsulates the early years. And I did want to touch on, you know, like the eras. So I do want to do more of these episodes. However, I don't want to make them like I've seen videos online where they go, in issue number 3, Sonic and Sally, blah, blah, blah. Moving on, issue 4, like going one by one. We're not doing that.
Yeah.
No. We're breaking it down by eras. So the next era would be Ken Penders, which was 39 to 159. Ian Flynn, which was 160 to 251. What's that?
I was going to say, Ken Penders is usually considered the golden era, right, of Archie comics. Am I right about that one? No?
I don't know about that. Well, but that's why I wanted to just cover these early years, because, like, Ian Flynn did 160 to 251. There was a reboot with 252 to 299, and then Penders had his own Knuckles series, and then there were a lot of spin-offs and specials. I feel like this early era really gets forgotten, because you ask any, you know, longtime Sonic fan and they go, oh, Ken Penders, Ian Flynn. They don't talk about the guy who kicked it all off, which is, you can see his name right here, Michael Gallagher. And he's the one that really, like, we should be thanking for even making this the success that it was, so that it could continue on under Ken and Ian. And I've got some really cool behind-the-scenes stories, but before we get to that, I want to ask you, George, did you ever read these comics when they released, and do you have any history with the series? I know you're a big comic guy, but I don't know if you're a kid's comic guy.
It's one of the things growing up. I could only get a few comic books when I was a kid because they were like $4.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, $2, sometimes $3. And so I would usually always get superhero comics because I always felt like if you're going to buy a comic book and you want to read about Superman or whatever, I could only get a few, so I would never get licensed stuff because I would always see the adventures. You could see Sonic on TV, you could play the video games. So to me, that was already enough for me, so I would never pick up licensed comics. I know there's a lot of people that do. That was just never my thing. And as for this, I've read them online before, like one issue here, one issue there. Usually ones that are memed on the internet. I was like, I have to read this issue. I want to see what this is all about. As far as my whole, I don't really have that much of a history, but I kind of do know, just being on forums and around the Sonic fandom, all the Sally stuff, the Acorn Kingdom, all that stuff kind of pops up, so you kind of know it, even though you don't read. I've never grew up with it or read it. I know you're more of the fan of the comic books, so it's obviously why you picked this. So I want to know what your history with the comic book is, and did you actually read it when it was coming out, or did you try to pick up a few of the issues growing up?
Well, so as far as my history with comics, so my dad was a big collector of Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge comics. So comic books were kind of a part of my early life. For my own interest, I really liked picking up comics that were based off of cartoons I would watch. So I would get a lot of the Disney Afternoon comics. I remember having a full run of Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, which was actually really well written and illustrated. And those Disney comics in that era, in the late 80s and early 90s, they were definitely a step above of a lot of the other licensed comics that were around at the time. Just like with the video games, how you'd play Aladdin and it seemed like you were playing a cartoon. You really felt like you were reading still frames from episodes you've never seen before. So that would really excite me. And then as for Sonic comics, I was really into Sonic the Hedgehog as a video game. In the past, I talked about how I got it, within a few months of release. And then it was just there, I don't think a lot of kids were really Sonic super fans. It was just kind of the video game you had. And then you'd go about your life and talk about Ninja Turtles and, local sports teams and stuff. It wasn't taking over your life like a lot of franchises do now. To me, it wasn't even a franchise. It was just this video game. And it must have been the summer of 1992, I want to say, when I was going on a road trip to South Dakota or North Dakota, out west from Minnesota. And we stopped at a gas station or something that had a magazine section. And I distinctly remember seeing this Sonic the Hedgehog comic, and I have it here. Let me find it. So I saw this this actual issue in the newsstand.
How much is that worth right now?
That pops. You know what? Let's do a little eBay dig. I was going to save this, but I think eBay digs are fun to do. So Sonic the Hedgehog #1. You can hear me typing, so it's legitimate. It's not great. Oh, this is someone selling a digital collection. So here I see it. Oh my God.
Digital.
These are all high-res scans. Okay, so here's one selling for $58.
Wow,
which is probably the condition mine's in. Here's one selling for $175. It's CGC graded, though, for a 9.4. Mine, though, I mean, you got to consider, I bought this on a road trip. Look at it's good quality. I mean, look at that spine.
What kind of kid? Dude, what kind of kid were you? I have none of the comics growing up because, I don't know. I would try to trace the comics, the issues. I think the only one that I survived was one from '99, and it's a Green Arrow issue, and it's all beat up, and I still have it. That's the only one that ever survived with me. I used to be terrible.
I have to think it's because my dad was a collector himself, and so he would give me his comic supplies to put the bags in. Now, this story I'm telling, though, this is my best recollection of it, because there is another issue #1, which we're going to talk about pretty quick here, which you can see here. And that's like, wait a minute, why is there first issue and first issue? So the story changes. Sometimes this is the issue I found, sometimes this is the issue. I'm pretty sure this was the issue, because what happened was when I got home, I was like, well, I want to get these. And there's a subscription card or form like you can mail in. And I did that, and they started sending me, I think they sent me them, like, the ongoing issues. And I was like, well, I got to catch up. And I think it just became like a mishmash. So I would have like issue 1 from the main series, which is this one. But then I would get issue 2 of the miniseries. But then I'd see that there was another issue 2. And I was so confused as a kid. It probably took me a good 6 months to wrap my head around that. Finally, I got into a groove. I was collecting the main series and then the I guess, miniseries here. And from then on, I collected up to, I want to say, like issue 110 or something like that, which is well into 2001. So I was a subscriber for like a good 9 years, which is a long time. And what really made me drop out of it was that I really liked Sonic Adventure 1 and 2's storyline, and I did not like that the comics decided not to adapt Sonic Adventure 2. That was and looking back, it makes me realize too that it was really on Ken Penders, because he was turning it into his own comic, to the point where it was like he was putting stuff that wasn't from the games, but instead from like what he wanted to do. And we've discussed this before, where people would use Sonic as a like vessel for their own projects, and sometimes it works, but a lot of the times it just reeks of them like being desperate. I don't know. Do you see this ever? Like, I kind of felt that in Sonic Boom almost, where it was like, we want to make a humorous kids show, and I guess we'll use Sonic as the vehicle for it. I mean, maybe I'm being cynical. Yeah. What do you think?
I see it all the time, especially with modern comics too. Like, there'll be like a random issue you'll get, and it's somebody complaining about social media, and it's like, really? Like you're Superman going to be complaining about people talking crap about him on Twitter? Like, let's get real here. He's supposed to be better than any human ever, but somehow he has the faults of some writer that hates Twitter, you know?
Right.
I've seen this before. Right. It's both ways, you know? And it's like, it's a little weird. Or I hate when they bring a comic book character that's like a young character, but they write him like an old man because the guy that's writing is 60 years old and he hates technology, so Nightwing hates technology too. And it's like, dude, he's 22 years old. What the hell? Yeah.
Right. Like, it's a slippery slope, because sometimes you'll be influenced by modern things going on, but you're true to the characters. Like, I mean, this isn't a comic book, but in The Dark Knight, cell phone technology and the idea of people's personal data is not a Batman thing, but they turned it into that by him using that sonar. Remember that? And, like, Fox was, like, telling him, you can't do this, I'll quit. Like, clearly that now, you know, right, this, I think even today Apple's like putting out new software to make it harder to track people. So that's relevant, but it works. Whereas like Ken Penders was like, I really want to do a like Nazi space story, and I'm going to use Sonic to tell that. And at the time I was I just want Shadow, I just want Rouge the Bat, like I want an adaptation of the games in the comics. Anyway, we'll get into that when we get into those later issues in future episodes. I did want to talk briefly about Superman. I also have another Superman comic here, and I have a Detective Comics here, and there's another one. It's Justice League Europe, I want to say. And what's important about these issues is these are some of the earliest published Sonic comics, believe it or not, because inside is... You see that?
What the hell?
It's a promotional Sonic the Hedgehog comic inside a Superman. And they did this in 4 issues for DC. This is a promotional comic that has also appeared in issues of Disney Adventures. It was its own standalone for, I think, Heroes Illustrated magazine. And that is from 1991, and that is actually something that predates Archie, and that's what became the Fleetway series. So... it's not the first time that Sonic was in a comic book. And now that I see this and then get into my notes right now, I think I'm going to contradict story I'm going to tell. So that's kind of funny. I'm correcting myself as we go. So I did want to talk about the publisher first. So Archie Comics Publications Incorporated is based out of Pelham, New York. And I know that well because that was kind of like where my subscriptions would come from. I would see these New York addresses a lot. I even wrote letters to them, so I was well aware of where they were. And they're responsible for the Archie line of comic books, which date all the way back to 1941. The orange-haired Archie Andrews first appeared in Pep Comics number 22 and was actually based off of Mickey Rooney's Andy Hardy films. I don't know if you know who Mickey Rooney is. Do you know who that is?
I do not know who that is.
Okay, so he was, believe it or not, he was kind of like a heartthrob back in the 40s.
Oh, really?
And if you saw him now, I'm trying to think, but he was like an everyday kind of kid, where he was like a little bit of a runt, like he was kind of short, but he was really funny, so people liked him. I can't really think of like a modern day equivalent, but I feel like that's kind of the character you see a lot in modern films, where it's like, it's not a super attractive, like buff kid. It's more like your boy next door sort of thing. And that's who Archie was. And so they had all these different comics: Archie, Betty, Veronica, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, who actually crossovers with Sonic in some comics, which is pretty insane. So, Archie was also responsible for doing other comics. They had superhero comics in 1939 under the name MLJ Magazines. And I think, George, you're going to have to come out right now and admit that you've read Archie, and you're actually sitting in a full room of Archie comics right now.
I have read Archie, and they were like the only comic books they would have like everywhere, because they were more like little graphic novellas or whatever they call them, where they're like, they look like those little like romance magazines or whatever. They're like really tiny.
Right.
And they used to sell them everywhere. I remember like if I would go shopping with my mom as a kid, and she would go like to buy food, I would go to the magazine section, and they would have Archie comics there, and they usually never had like DC comics or anything like that. It was like the comic books, the superhero comic books stayed in comic book shops, it felt like, but Archie was okay to sell in Walmart or whatever. So I would definitely read Archie comics when I would go food shopping. I'd never buy them because I was cheap, but like I would definitely, I have to save up money for the the video games, but I would definitely read them and skim through them. The best thing is that they were never really long. Like, you could just read an issue and you have a story and you're good to go. And I kind of like that about them. Right,
exactly. And there's something really comforting about them. Like, I've read quite a few of them too, but oddly enough, I own two issues. And they're both like goofy crossovers, because Archie, for a long time, it was just like a staple in the newsstands. And then I think probably around the time Sonic was coming out, they were thinking we need to appeal more to kids, and kids are not into 1940s characters. So they would update Archie with the times. But honestly, like, when you're a kid, are you going to grab Sonic or are you going to grab Archie? And so Archie would do other things too, like crossover with Ninja Turtles. I think the idea was to see how edgy they could get. So I think Spawn crossed over with Archie. I know Punisher, Archie versus Punisher is a thing. So,
oh God,
they tried to outdo themselves, and I think Riverdale, the TV show, was kind of their ultimate, where it was like a dark, kind of sexy teen murder mystery show, but set in Riverdale with the Archie characters. And I personally, though, my big kind of I don't know, I don't want to say guilty pleasure, because I just get pleasure from it. There's no guilt. Were both Dennis the Menace comics, and especially Casper. I really liked Casper, and I think his name's Spooky or something, and then Hot Stuff, like all of the Harvey Toons ones, where it was like these little fat little like kitty creatures. They all look the same, but it was so comforting, because you could pick up any issue and you did not feel like you were coming in the middle of like a story arc. You were never lost. And honestly, that kind of translates into these early Sonic comics, a lot of one-offs, and I think that's what really defines that early era, is it wasn't like they were going in and saying, we're going to tell a 16-issue arc. Like nowadays, I'll complain to you about how the IDW Sonic comics are getting boring to me because it's like Sonic dealing with a metal virus for a year and a half. Whereas here, you can go through it like 16 or 20 issues in that time, and you get probably about 60 different stories or 40 different stories because they'll cram 2 stories in a book. So talking about Archie here, Sonic, of course, he wasn't part of the Archie universe, but like I mentioned, he did cross over with Sabrina, but that's a podcast for another day. I really want to talk about that someday. But instead, Sonic was actually licensed from SEGA and released under the Archie Adventure Series imprint. And I'll show that up here if you're watching on video. You can see Archie Adventure Series. And so that, an imprint, is a trade name under which publishers release work, and in this case, the adventure name was meant to differentiate from the more kid or teenager-friendly funny books. Archie Adventure Series titles remained around, released around the time of Sonic, included The Adventures of Bayou Billy. Do you ever play that game? It's a Konami game.
No, I haven't actually. Good?
Yeah, it's... I don't think it's good because I think there's an Angry Video Game Nerd video on it, but it just makes me laugh that Sonic had a comic, and then Konami's like, well, we're going to give you The Adventures of Bayou Billy, which really didn't last long. There's also a very popular TM... Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, I mean, I know why it didn't last long, because, like, who's going to want that comic book?
I would. I don't know. There's also a very popular TMNT Adventures and Mighty Mutanimals line. But the Archie Adventure Series imprint actually existed decades prior with 1960s comics that included Adventures of the Fly, Adventures of Jaguar, and Shadow, but not the Shadow from Sonic. And it wasn't until 2014 that Archie actually moved Sonic to the Archie Action imprint, which also included the Mega Man comics. So you're a comic book fan. Do you have any favorite imprints of your own? Do you know about this sort of practice in the industry?
Yeah, it happens all the time. There's like Miller World, where like an author would get like his own imprint within like Marvel and stuff. Mine probably would be like kind of generic. I think Vertigo by DC Comics was probably, the guys that did Watchmen and they did, all the more adult stuff like the Sandman. I think that kind of stuff, they kind of changed, what comic books, or at least comic books at that era in the 80s, what they were really about, like more adultish. I know we're talking about kid comics, but these imprints would go both ways. They could let you experiment, and they could let you do a lot of different things. I think Archie did something like this, didn't they, with their, where they try to make horror comics or whatever, where like the Archie characters die and all that, or is that just the main series now?
No, you're right. There was like an Archie horror imprint, and I'm not sure if Archie Action is still around, but they tried to do, or at least I think they still are doing an Ian Flynn fronted Cosmo or something, which is actually based on an older license that they carried for a while. I guess they rebooted it with Ian Flynn. My own favorite imprints, I mean, I can't really think about many off the top of my head, but I did enjoy, I think they were called Star Comics, which was from, I think, Marvel, and that's what they released a lot of their licensed comics under. There was Ewoks, droids, some other characters. And actually, writer Michael Gallagher, who was a longtime Archie employee, I think he actually came from that sort of Star Comics world. And he, at the time when he was working with Archie, points to the year July 23rd, 1992 as the day that he learned that Archie Comics had acquired the license to Sonic the Hedgehog. He described it as it was described to him as a hot new property, and he was told that Sonic was being developed into a TV series by Deke. His editor at the time, Daryl Edelman, chose Gallagher as the lead writer for the series because Edelman thought that Gallagher's success as a writer for Marvel's Elf Comics, which was through the Star Comics imprint with Marvel, was enough of a success to warrant him working on the Sonic line. The Elf Comics actually ran for 3 years, which was like a big deal at the time, and I'm sure when they picked him for Sonic, they were like, 3 years, if we can do that, that's great. Little did they know, that we as adults would be like reporting, writing blogs about Archie comics as late as like the late 2010s. The two actually went on during the same phone call to discuss Sonic, as well as some bad guy named Robotnik, and then Sonic's, he described it as the subsurface love interest, a princess. So I think we kind of already answered the question I asked here about reading. I was going to ask about reading kids' comics, but why do you think, what do you think made them so appealing to kids?
The Archie comics, that when they first launched?
Any licensed kid comics.
I think it's because they did a pretty good job usually of like condensing, or at least for the Sonic the Hedgehog series, it would be like, for some of them it was like the Donald Duck stuff. It would be like seeing a episode of Donald Duck but in a comic book form and that you never seen before. So I could see that appeal. But for Sonic, to me, when I watched the TV show or even glanced through the comics, to me it was more like it filled things that the video game would never talk about, because like there's this world created with Sonic Team. You know that it's larger than they show you because it's so condensed. It's just Sonic, Eggman, and the boss, or Tails later on, and Knuckles. But like, there's no like city. There's no other side characters because it's a 16-bit game. So when you would see this, you could kind of like let your imagination run wild. Like it kind of felt like adults that were kids writing from like, okay, this is the video game. Let's add a bunch of, side characters and do all these little things. And I think they did an alright job. I read some of them. You told me to read, I didn't finish them all, but like I did read some of them, and they did a good job using like little bad guys as a villain for one issue. Usually the little badniks. So yeah, I think that's why they were successful.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. For me, like the big draw for the cartoon shows was that these are like more adventures that take place after the games. There was no real thought of what canon is what, or, is Sonic Team in Japan talking to these guys in America making a cartoon. Like really it was all one story to me, and the comics just kind of continued that. And what I really liked about the comics too is that they brought together Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, which was the weekday funny cartoon, and then the Saturday morning show, which was the much more dramatic one, because you would see characters from both of these actually, in the same stories. Like you would never see Princess Sally in the cartoons with Scratch and Grounder, but in the comics you would. And so it almost felt like the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog was a prequel to the Saturday morning show, and the comics were just kind of like the in-between story, and it was just kind of exciting to see all of that unfolding, and then seeing video game references, and in the end, I mean, up until it rebooted with issue 150 or 251, the Archie comics were like the ultimate amalgamation of every bit of Sonic canon. And I thought that was really impressive. I mean, it was a mess by that time, but it was still cool. The Archie comics actually kicked off, like I mentioned, with issue 0, so if you want to bring that up on screen. And the plan was to have multiple self-contained stories in each issue. So typically you would get like a 2-parter in the same issue. And while it's unknown to me why this was done, because, I mean, you would read and it would say like, oh no, what's going to happen? Read on in part 2. You turn the page. Part 2. I don't know why they did this. My only thought is maybe they could generate like a sort of cliffhanger, like TV would do, but instead of having a commercial, you just have a way to end that part of the story and then pick it up and continue on. I guess nowadays it works because they could republish those in digests and then break it up. So you'd do like, and they actually did this. They would have Sonic digests, and it would have part 1, and then you buy the next like little supermarket digest this big, and it would have part 2. So it was a nice way to republish things, but at the time I don't know if that was the plan. Gallagher was said at the time that his direction was to establish the characters quickly, through strong exposition and used visuals from the games, which he actually received via a fax machine. He was also told on this conversation that I guess is still going on in July 92 that Scott Shaw was doing the pencils for the comics. Gallagher remarked after the call that he told his dad, and his dad, who's a legendary cartoonist, I'm not sure who he was, but let's take his word for it. His dad said, "Hey, you never know what'll catch on." And so I guess his dad was right. It definitely did catch on. Why do you think this direction worked so well for Sonic and comic books, to do this sort of like strong exposition, game visuals, like little mini bite-sized stories in each issue?
Because, I mean, a lot of the fan base and stuff were video gamers and stuff, and we were, like, it was a young format, and you have to be quick.
Yeah.
Like, I understand that now IDW could get away with really long stories and stuff now, like, because most people that are buying comic books are people like us. They grew up with Sonic or whatever, or grew up with Mega Man, or grew up with TMNT. You know, IDW does a lot of those, or even the Transformers stuff. But if they did a Transformers comic book in the early 90s and then they had 2-year-long issues, stories, it wouldn't happen. It wouldn't have taken off. So I think you just had to change with your audience. And at the time, Sonic's audience was a young audience, and they did a good job at, condensing their stories for, like you said, it's like part 1, part 2, and they were in one issue. And they usually, all the stories usually have an ending by the time you get to the end of the issue. It's not like they're baiting you to continue buying another issue. Like, if all you did was go to a store and you bought one issue, you would have a complete story. While DC Comics, you have to buy one Superman issue, and it's like, wait, what part? I have to buy like 900 other issues to get the whole story. So at least it felt that way.
Right. Yeah,
Definitely,
and I would say too that.
Go on.
The Archie comics actually like grew with the readers too, which I think is why I stayed with it so long, because if these comics continued to have this format into like the early 2000s, I don't even think I would have been with it that long. I actually dropped them, like I said, because I just didn't like where the story was going. It wasn't like I was like, oh, these are kids' books. Like, they were telling some pretty, like, I don't know, maybe not adult, but definitely like young adult stories at that time, and they just didn't appeal to me personally as a young adult, even though I think that was their intent. And it wasn't really until the Sonic Boom comics came out, back when, what was that, like 2016 or something, that they revived this format and would do these part 1, part 2, little mini one-off stories. And I'd love to see them do that again, actually. I'd love to see them do a like ongoing classic Sonic comic that was more like this, like one-off stories each issue, not having to do with like a 16-issue arc. Not even think of arcs. Like, you don't need arcs. Throw arcs out the window. Just tell, fun stories that kids are going to like. But then, I don't know, maybe little kids don't want to read about classic Sonic. What do I know? I don't work in the comics industry. So soon after, Gallagher got a look at the supporting cast from model sheets that were created for the upcoming Deke show. He also received 3 pages of character descriptions, locations, and the backstory, which mentioned Knothole, which is Sonic's home, Snively, Robotnik's chief toady, and the SWAT-bot enforcers. So if you want to bring the cast up, we can take a look at that. You kids at home with your audio podcast, maybe you can just Google search Sonic Sat AM cast. It's a very popular photo of them. So first up we have Sonic. I think that's, we all know who this is, the main protag of the series. He's able to run at superhuman speed, and he's the only freedom fighter capable of using magical rings called power rings. Sonic has an impatient and headstrong personality, but is also fearless, heroic, and well-meaning. He also mockingly refers to Robotnik as Robotnik, which is peak hilarity, in my opinion. What do you think of Sonic? He's pretty cool, huh?
Of course. Mm-hmm. He's probably one of the
next up
top... Sorry, go on.
No, go.
I was gonna say. I wasn't gonna say anything. You continue. Sorry about that.
Okay. Antoine. So he's like this little fox guy in like a French suit. You can see him there. He's a coyote with a French accent whose awkwardness often places the others in danger and gets him captured. He has some difficulty speaking English, and he has romantic feelings for Princess Sally and attempts to impress her. However, his selfishness hinders his goal. Sonic often teases Antoine over his shortcomings. Then we have Boomer, also known as Rotor. He actually had a different name early on in production, and then it changed, I believe, for the TV show, but the old name bled into the comics for a while. He's a walrus and the mechanic of Knothole Village. He provides the Knothole freedom fighters with useful inventions and accompanies them on infiltrations. And, well, this didn't happen until years, maybe a decade later. I do believe pre-reboot, Ian Flynn intended for Rotor to be an openly gay character, and they never got around to it, or SEGA told them no.
Wow.
I think there might be some hints in there. I don't know. Like, I think you see his like boyfriend or something. But how's that for progressive storytelling? The Talking Walrus.
Is
next up
gay? Like, how is he gay though? He has a backwards hat. Nobody. I mean, he's like Limp Bizkit, basically. I'm just joking with you, dude. You know what's funny about that? Like,
gay.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense now. No, I was gonna say.
I think Michael Stipe is gay though.
How would you? I mean, how would you feel that they kind of put that in the kids' comic? Like, imagine if they just did Sonic's Archie's like, you know what? Yeah, go ahead, do it. And all of a sudden, like, how many parents at the time you think would be really, really like, upset and offended?
Right. Yeah. I mean, if we're talking early '90s, a ton of them. If we're talking 2021, none. So it's really a matter of
definitely
timing.
Today, no.
Unfortunately, all these characters outside of Sonic and Tails are not in the comics anymore. So, you know, they can't even revive these concepts. But, you know, you never know. I feel like we'll probably see that. I think we'll probably see openly gay characters in the IDW comics at some point. We might even already see some, and they just haven't touched on that yet. Coming up next, we have Sally, a chipmunk who is the rightful princess of Mobotropolis and Sonic's love interest. As a strategist for the Knothole Freedom Fighters, she is knowledgeable and the voice of reason. Sally tries to keep Sonic grounded. And she's super popular. There are Sally fan groups all over the internet. You know, my opinion on Sally is she's a fine character. I like that she's quite different from Amy Rose. I also think that people campaigning to have Sally come back, like, it's admirable, but they should also realize this is a character who is going to only exist in a cartoon for a couple years. And thanks to the comics, she existed for nearly 20 years, which is kind of insane, in my opinion. If not more than 20 years, I guess, maybe close to 25. So kind of be happy that she has had such a long history with the franchise. And, you know, never say never. I feel like IDW can always do a Freedom Fighter event and reintroduce these characters in a new way. But right now, you know, we'll see. We also have Tails, a young two-tailed fox who idolizes Sonic. While usually left behind in Knothole, he proves useful in deadly missions. I feel like the comics treated Tails more like in the games than the TV show did, especially the Saturday morning show, where it was like he's a little kid, he shouldn't go on missions, which always kind of I didn't enjoy, because obviously Sonic and Tails are a team, and to suddenly have Tails be like the little kid of the group and left behind a lot of the times, and Sonic's like concerned about his well-being. I don't know, what do you think of that dynamic as opposed to how the games are?
I like the fact that, like, Tails is part of it, and he's supposed to, like, gain courage, and he finally gains courage. I think Sonic Adventure probably did that the best for him. And I think, yeah, I'm not a big fan of the whole, like, he's overly kiddie and all that, whatever. I understand it's a cartoon, and Dick, or what is that the company's name? How do you say it?
Deke.
Deke. I didn't want. When I was a kid, I was like, hey, it's the Dick Show, because the Deke. So I would definitely say it's not. I mean, I understand what they were going for. They were trying to show kids like lessons during these shows where they wanted to be like, you're too young. Don't go out and hang out with your older brother and run really fast, I guess. So, I don't know. I just don't like that characterization of Tails myself.
Yeah, I was never really a big fan of aging him down. I feel like, though, maybe if the show continued, because, I mean, we've never done a Saturday morning Sonic episode of Sega Talk, and we will eventually, but in the show, maybe they wanted to continue on and have him grow into the role and, like, turn into Tails, but you always are kind of, like, risking it when you do that. Like, with the Zack Snyder Superman, he would say, oh, by the 5th film, he would turn into the Superman we all know, and it's like, but dude, what if you don't get 5 films? Next up, we have Bunny Rabbit. And Bunny, she is a rabbit with a southern accent. Half of her body was roboticized, leaving her left arm and both legs mechanical. She is skilled in martial arts and wants to be returned to normal. Then we have Mutsuki, who is Sonic's dog. That's all I have to say about him. Uncle Chuck is Sonic's uncle. He is the inventor of the roboticizer before Robotnik stole it. He was roboticized himself and made into one of Robotnik's slaves until Sonic restored his memory. He serves as a spy for the Freedom Fighters, and according to Robbie London, who I think worked on the Dick Show, he was actually named after a writer and animator, Chuck Menville, who passed away in 1992. Robotnik is a warlord who seeks to cover Mobius in machinery and transform its population into robotic slaves by roboticizing them. He is chiefly opposed by the not whole freedom fighters, and his obsession is with destroying Sonic, is also his downfall. In the Deke version, in the Saturday morning one, his real first name is Julian, and he adopts the moniker Robotnik after his takeover, which is pretty interesting. It's almost like a title, I guess, in the cartoon. Then, of course, we had the Badniks. We all know them. We all love them. And then Cluck, who is technically not a Badnik from the games, but, there are a lot of chicken characters. He's a robotic chicken. He's the only creature Robotnik shows affection to. It's almost like his pet. Then we have Snively, Robotnik's assistant and nephew, who is constantly abused by his uncle. And then SWAT bots, Robotnik's primary henchmen and foot soldiers, basically the stormtroopers of the show. So, what do you think of this cast?
It's an interesting cast. I mean, there's some stuff I don't like the robotic bunny thing. I'm gonna be honest with you, she's pretty cool. Princess Sally and the whole Acorn Kingdom's a little much for me. I always thought it was weird that every single time Sonic has a rewrite or something, they always want to add a princess, or at least a love interest, right? So when they first did the first thing, it was supposed to be a human love interest, right? Madonna. Right. This one, it's Princess Sally. Then obviously Sonic Team added Amy. And then when they rebooted it, they did Princess Elise. And then when we did the Sonic OVA episode, there was another girl that I guess she was flirting with Knuckles, right? She's supposed to be that idol girl, the cat girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just weird that in all of Sonic's history, every single creator, in every medium, is we should give Sonic a love interest. It's been one of the things that, Princess Sally, I could see her having a bunch of fans. I mean, it's not that surprising considering, she's one of the first females in any media for Sonic. Does she predate Amy?
Right. Princess Sally, I believe, does predate Amy because they were developing the Deke show in early 1992, and I have to guess they were not aware of Sonic's CD. When did Sonic's CD release? September 93. So yeah, most definitely Sally predates Amy for sure. Interestingly enough, though, she had a different color. She was almost like the Amy Rose pink initially, and if you check out this reprint archive book of the original miniseries that Archie did, there's a joke on the front where it has the 3 different colors of Sally. So there's this one's inside the comic of the miniseries. This pink one is so she was blonde at one point, and then she was pink, and then she was brown. And this is, again, just a sign of Deke sending, like, model sheets, but they weren't colored. And then they were like, oh, here's the color. And then they started animating, and they're like, no, wait, here's the color. And the comics were just, like, trying to keep up. I don't know if they ever explained that in a story. Like, maybe she dyed her hair or something, but I don't know. What do you think? I think she looks kind of cool as pink. I actually like pink Sally.
I like Pink Sally too, but they do mention in the comic, right, that she changed her hair color, and they like make a joke about it, don't they?
Oh, maybe you're right. I think you're right.
Because when I was reading it, they make a little comment about it, but not super like absurd. I was going to tell you your pictures. I don't know what happened to them, but they're all out of order. I don't understand. Letting
really?
you know. Yeah. But
are they grouped maybe by when I uploaded them? I don't know.
Maybe. I'll have to fix it maybe. But you can continue, sorry.
Oh, that's fine. So we've got, if you can put up that sketch picture, it's what Michael Gallagher roughed out. So Gallagher, this is actually from the foreword that he wrote for this compilation of stories. He talked about his creative process. So what he actually would do, he would write the stories. He wasn't the illustrator, but he would rough out the script in cartoon form. So essentially he would draw out the comic himself. And so this image that's shown here is like a really rough sketch, but it basically looks like the final version of the first issue. So you can see that there. It compares, I mean, pretty well. So it seems like he was working alongside Scott Shaw to create something that really was in line with what Michael Gallagher was intending. The editor actually agreed that this process was the best because the comic was actually making several stops in the approval process. So in this case with Sonic, Archie would see it, and then SEGA would see it, and then Deke would see it. But I don't think Deke had much of a say in it. But they had some sort of input. Gallagher actually said his sketch, which we see there, he claims it's the very first Sonic the Hedgehog comic book art. I disagree because, as I mentioned, in 1991 Superman comic, you very clearly see Sonic the Hedgehog comic book art. So I'm sorry to burst Michael Gallagher's bubble, but he was not the first Sonic the Hedgehog artist, unfortunately. His point man at SEGA, I've never heard of this guy, Bob Harris. I'm assuming he was in charge of like merch or marketing or something. He gave some criticism, but it was described as constructive and helpful, and overall he was told that the team were on the right track. So SEGA was happy with the process, and it seems like drawing Sonic as the story's unfolding really does work out well for them. Gallagher noted that an ongoing comic book series can only go so far with characters who are given one-word descriptions. So, like, we went through that list. A lot of them were, like, selfish, rebellious, childish. That kind of thing works for a few issues, but after a while you're going to have the characters grow. Thankfully, he really did feel like as he progressed with the issues, he got to know the characters more, and they started to kind of suggest to him what kind of stories he could tell. The ingredients, so here's what I thought was really interesting, is he laid out what the ingredients for a Sonic story was, specifically at this time in history, so those early issues. To him, you needed a conflict, some mystery, some action, subplots, wordplay, which I think they really cranked up. There's a lot of jokes in these, like little puns and things. Exotic locations, new heroes and new villains, wacky weapons, and then moving the spotlight to each character to give them relevance and, wherever possible, a moral at the end of the story. So, me personally, as a longtime reader, I think this perfectly encapsulates the early years of Sonic the Hedgehog comics. Not to talk about Penders too much, but I feel like Gallagher's description is simply not what Penders eventually turned the series into, despite the fact that Penders actually did write in these early 38 issues. It's just that he wasn't really pushing his sort of agenda. He was kind of following that template. But interestingly enough, I do feel like Penders did some things right. Like he was able to like pick up story elements a few issues later and like reference them and kind of build on certain characters, which we'll get into once we start talking about some of the standout issues. So how do you think later Sonic comics compare to these early issues? We discussed it a bit, but like, are you aware of like how Ian Flynn, for example, approaches a comic book as opposed to these early ones?
I think Ian Flint's is more of like, I guess, more of a IDW comic writer, kind of, where they like have longer stories and actual arcs, and he has like a continuing story. I think that's kind of what people expect from comics now. Except for these people, like the early comics were very like episodic. It felt like I was watching Sonic Boom or something, like a Saturday morning cartoon, right? Where it was like part 1, part 2, the cliffhanger in the middle for the commercial, and then you ended up, and then they had the little shorts where it was more silly gags. Basically, it was like sketch comedy. Where I like that, I posted that late night with Sonic thing, and then
Right.
and then they would do the chili dog, how to do a chili dog early on. Little things like that, I think, added a lot of character, or at least comic. They do that in Ian Flynn comics too. The little back things, but Ian's more of he has a bigger story with character arcs and stuff like that. This one's are like random issue. One guy's jealous, so he gets in trouble, or it's a random issue of something that Robotic came up with. So nothing wrong with that.
Right,
They're just
right.
different. You?
Yeah, and I definitely agree. I think Ian Flynn can write those types of issues. Ken Penders definitely can, because he did.
Yeah.
But they have their own style that I think fit comics either of their era or modern times. Like, I don't think Ken Penders could make it in today's comics world. I'm actually kind of surprised he lasted as long on the Sonic comics.
I am too.
Yeah, and I just, I think there's a special charm to them that is still relevant today. Like, I still see kids' comics that are written in this sort of style. As I mentioned, the Sonic Boom comics were the closest thing we had to these original Sonic comics in the modern era. I want to talk now about the miniseries. So, miniseries issues, technically it was issues 0 through 3, but we're going to talk about 1 through 3 here. So, Scott Shaw, he actually departed after issue 2. So this guy's artwork, I think it's very good. It's very suitable for Sonic. It's a little American cartoony, but very expressive, very well done. He departed, but he still did the final issue's cover, and he was replaced actually by, and I'm seeing here, Dave Menak, and his style, it's similar, I would say. I mean, if you're watching the video here, I'm just holding up some images. It's similar, but I think it's a little more rough. He does a lot more shading, like little shaded lines. So, okay, I'm sorry. I showed a picture from Shaw. Now, if you jump over, this is the next issue. Looking at it, it's a little more sketchy. He likes to do a lot of little debris. He likes to do a lot of little details. Like, you're going to see not every piece of grass, but like little pieces of grass and grit and dirt and lines. And like when Sonic jumps on a robot, there's like little pieces of like metal and plastic and things flying up. It's different, but I really like it. Towards the end of this show, I'm actually going to show some original comic art from Dave Menak, and it's really cool to see, big and drawn. I love his work, and apparently Archie did too, because he remained on for quite a while with the Sonic series. So after Scott Shaw departed, like I said, Dave Menak took over art duties. He worked really well with Gallagher because they both had time together working at Marvel on licensed comics. Manak was actually the lead writer on Star Wars Ewoks and Droids comics, which had a very long run. I think it ran for about 30 or 40 issues for Ewoks, and I think only 10 or 13 for Droids. Other staff on hand were Jorge Pacheco and Bill White, who served as inkers for the miniseries. It was very apparent early on that the team had a hit as Sonic surged in popularity and the comic sales were high. So immediately after the miniseries, Sonic got his own ongoing series, and Gallagher ceased to be the only writer but continued to contribute stories. New writers included Angelo de... Oh man, I'm going to butcher his name. And it's usually only the Japanese names we butcher on this show. Angelo de Sereri, Mike Kanturovich, Ken Penders, Kent Taylor, and Rich Kozlowski, who also, I believe, did inking. Rich Kozlowski did. Michael Gallagher said his personal favorites that he created were the Tales miniseries, which introduced the Down Under Freedom Fighters, the 40 Fathom Freedom Fighters, and Crocbot. The Sonic Quest miniseries, which was a tie-in with Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 and Knuckles. The Triple Trouble adaptation, issue number 25, which was his first team-up with Patrick Spaziente, and adapted Sonic CD, and then many specials. So it was very clear that Michael Gallagher kind of went on to become the specials and miniseries guy, whereas these other writers started to take more control of the ongoing comic. At the time, specials and miniseries usually continued plot points going on in the comics, but not to the level that they would later on. There was some connective tissue, but nothing was like must read. It wasn't like, oh man, I skipped that special about Sonic meaning Knuckles. Now I won't be able to follow. Like Michael Gallagher, I have my own favorites from the early years of the comics, and I thought we would spend kind of the remainder of the show here just looking at some issues. There's 38 that I said we're going to talk about, but honestly, we're going to cover maybe half of them at best. So first up, issue 1. This is obviously a very important issue. This was the first issue of the ongoing series. This was the first one I picked up. I have it sitting here next to me. So when one of Robotnik's SWAT bots developed a mechanical plant named Krudzu, a malevolent robot-like plant with an affinity for water, he decides to modify a burrow bot to plant its seeds within the Great Forest. Meanwhile, in Knothole, Antoine is depressed because Sally only pays attention to Sonic, and he decides to give her a bouquet of flowers. Unfortunately, it does not end up going so well. Can Sonic get there in time to save him in the forest as well? So, I mean, as an issue 1, it's clear that they're not trying to become an issue 1. You could make this issue 1 like issue 3 and you wouldn't notice. There's no real setup. There's no real origin story here. Sonic never meets the Freedom Fighters in the comics. They're just always a team. What do you think of that sort of way to kick things off? Like, wouldn't you expect more of an introduction, or do you think that kind of works with this type of comic? Just do a story.
I think it works for this type of comic because, like, when you're a kid, it's just you read the book and you're like, oh, this is part of the world and this is what we're going into. I don't think anyone ever questioned it or anything. And I think they really wanted to continue the audience from the TV show. So they probably were thinking that most people that were buying the comic probably watched the TV show, or at least knew about the TV show. Because I remember being a kid and I was like, too young to be a fanboy, right? But like I remember like drawing, Sonic the Hedgehog and making the little like paper ornaments so you could put it on your Christmas tree by my, just because it's a TV show, not even the game. It was just because I was watching the TV show in the morning. So I think that was more, I don't know, the video game was obviously super popular, but I wonder if the TV show really sold it more than the video game. Because I mean, like, back then not everybody was a gamer, you know what I mean? So I don't know.
Right.
I think it works, though. What about you?
Yeah, I think it works, too. I think if they make the first issue such a grand thing, they're kind of stepping on the toes of the cartoon series, because the cartoon series is really what the comic is an adaptation of, and it's not the comic's place to be the setup. It's more a accompaniment to the cartoon. So the kids probably saw that first issue of the Saturday morning show, and then they picked up the comic, assuming that that's how the release schedule worked. Issue 4, if you bring that up here, this is a pretty big story just because it's the first one to feature Super Sonic. And so the cover obviously does not sell that at all. In many cases, the cover does not tie in with any of the story inside. Like, Sonic doesn't clean chimneys in this issue. If anything, it's more of a joke about how grim and dark comics were at this time. So this is the all-new, all-different, grittier, darker Sonic the Hedgehog, where he's cleaning chimneys, so he got gritty and dark. It's almost like a Mad Magazine. That. Yeah. And I really like how, like, dirty he looks there. And you'll see this often. Like, there's little word balloons on many of the covers, lots of jokes. It really is not, and I'm actually looking through my stack in front of me here. It's not until, like, issue... Man, they just keep going with these little, like, jokes. Like issue 26 or 27 that they really kind of start phasing them out and just doing pictures. I mean, it's fun, though. It's a little joke, a little gag on the cover, and there's some really great ones. But in this one, the big deal is that Super Sonic has arrived, and he fights this thing. It's like a giant salamander called the Universe Salamander. It's a very strange story. We have a screenshot here of it. And what I think is so cool is that, you know, they tie in with the games directly here. So it was very clear that SEGA was giving them direction. They were playing the games. They knew how Super Sonic came about. So they decided to do a little video game tie-in to the point where you're actually meant to, like, touch the comic and play the game. And I think, again, here's kind of a case of the comic doing the heavy lifting, because the TV series never did this. The TV series never dipped this far into the games. It was much more of its own thing. And so it's almost like the comics were acting as more of an adaptation of the video games than the TV show itself. Do you think that takes away from the storytelling, just doing a straight-up game like, it's not even an adaptation. It's like a moment from the video games happening in the middle of the story.
I would say maybe, but then when you think about it, when you're a kid, you're like, I really like, we never really saw that much video games on TV growing up. Like, now anybody could go on Twitch and watch their favorite dude play a whole game for 16 hours, you know? But back then, it was like, right. I would watch movies sometimes just so I could get to see a little bit of video game clips. Or we watch those, like, terrible, like, G4 TV shows so we could see a little clip of gameplay of a new game that's coming out. Now, you could go on Twitch and some guy gets it early and he gets to stream it early, so you get to watch him play it for, you know, whatever, and donate and ask him questions. So, like, back then, having little references like this into your comics and stuff, I mean, in the comics and other because they didn't do it in the TV show, and it was something that I noticed as a kid. It's like the TMNT on cartoons have different villains than the movie ones, and the movies ones are different than the comics. So it's like, why? It's like, why isn't Bebop and Rocksteady in the new movie? Why do we have these two other babies, or some wannabe Bebops and Rocksteady? You know what I'm talking about? Right.
I know what you mean. And you would get that, too, with Sonic. You would have Scratch and Grounder, but then in the Saturday morning show, you would have Cluck and Snively. And then in the video games, he really didn't have any two henchmen until Sonic Colors came about with Orbot and Cubot. So, you know, it's as we got older, it was obviously a case of different creative teams having different inklings. Like, the comic book team obviously was like, we like the games, let's reference them. Whereas the Saturday morning team was like, no, we have our own story we're telling. We are not going to bog things down with, like, Sega Genesis tie-ins. Me personally, I like the way the comics work. Coming up next here, we have issue 6, which is another very blatant video game reference. It is, I think, the first straight-up adaptation in the Archie Sonic comics. Of course, they would reference events from Sonic 1 and Sonic 2, but here we are actually seeing Sonic the Hedgehog Spinball played out in comic book form. And what makes this unique is that The comics were kind of an adaptation of both the Saturday and the weekday cartoon. However, the weekday cartoon, Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, had its own Sonic Spinball episode. So it was kind of at this point, I was like, wait a minute, so which story happened? Because the video game has the story, the comic has the story, and the TV show has the story, and they're all different. And so this was kind of also the first time that the comics diverged from the source material that it was referencing. It was almost like, it was making kids kind of realize that not all the same people were working on these things. Issue 8,
you got to bring that
one up. This one,
I was gonna say,
yeah.
Before we go to the 8, I just want to make a big comment about his really cool scarf he has here. Surprised that it hasn't become merch.
Oh yeah, go for it.
It just looks nice, that's all. It reminds me of Sega AM. Yeah, the one that he has on. Very slick. But number 8.
Yeah, the joke is that it's a comic book tie-in, and Sonic's wearing a tie. But
it's
honestly,
a tie.
I
thought it was a scarf.
Tie.
Sorry.
No, yeah. I dig it, though. It kind of reminds me of when you saw Sonic's cool clothes in the OVA. Like, he has a style that can't be beat. Issue 8. Again, kind of with that grittier, darker cover. This one, again, is poking fun at the comic book competition. We see Spider-Man, Batman, Wolverine, the Punisher, Ghost Rider. I don't know whose foot that is kicking a bucket, but there's something going on there. And it's Sonic the Hedgehog leaves the competition in the dust. And this is actually a case where the cover actually references the story inside. So this one, I don't know if it's a personal favorite of mine, but it always stuck with me. In the story itself, Crabmeat, who is a badnik, is actually caught reading Sonic the Hedgehog comics by Dr. Robotnik. And Dr. Robotnik actually thinks, oh, okay, well, I should build superpowered robots to attack Sonic. So the whole issue has robots that are parodies of real superheroes. So there's Botman instead of Batman. And then things get really crazy. If you want to bring up this scene, it's an Urkelbot. So it's...
Oh, God. That thing is scary.
So it is scary. And so what they were going to do is they were going to make a Wolverine, which is obviously a reference to X-Men, but instead they made Wolverkle. And Wolverkle is a robot Urkel, which actually did exist on Family Matters. There was an Urkelbot. So I don't know if SEGA did it first, but here we have Sonic meeting Urkelbot, who is voiced by Jaleel White, who also voices Sonic. And then on top of that, instead of Spawn, we have Spawn Mower. So it is a Spawn lawnmower. Like, how do you not love this?
Oh my God, they were just going crazy. It's crazy.
And
it's
what I think is really funny too, there's a great joke here too. Do you see it? He goes, "Bah, this isn't helping my image. Image. Aha, just the hero I need. Behold, Sonic, my ultimate new wave bot, the awesome Spawn Mower."
Jesus, I'm surprised they did this kind of. Yeah, this is pretty good. I wish they would do more of this in the new one, where they just like mock current comic books and modern comics, because I mean Spawn during this time it was huge. Like Spawn was like a phenomenon, so it would make sense to mock him.
Well, believe it or not, they did a crossover with Spawn and other Image comic characters. So yeah, Sonic gets around. Issue 9, bringing this one up. This one's a big deal. Just because it is a character from Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, not only being adapted into the comics, but it was almost like I felt like a straight adaptation of the episode itself, but with the characters from the Saturday morning show worked in. So after a thorough analysis of Sonic's profile, Robotnik builds the ultimate evil robot, the Pseudo-Sonic. Meanwhile, Sonic, out picking flowers for Sally, comes in contact with some poisoned sumac and blows up like a balloon. And so if you've ever seen those Sonic cells of Sonic, like really big, that's him blowing up like a balloon during the Pseudo-Sonic story in the cartoon. And so here's a case where they adapted the cartoon episode but worked in characters from Knothole. So it's a very... It's a very strange mix. And then, of course, Pseudo Sonic makes people think of Metal Sonic, but Metal Sonic wasn't really a thing in the comics yet. So, I don't know, it's weird, isn't it? I don't know, that's why I picked this one. It's strange. Yeah. And we have a scene from the cartoon, if you want to bring that up. It's the same character.
Before we go to that, I was going to make a comment about the cover. The cover is actually a reference to the Flash issue where there's two Flashes and they're both running next to a wall. Have you seen that cover?
Obviously I haven't because I didn't reference it, but yeah, that's cool.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what the reference is here, because it's supposed to be the first time that I think it's Barry Allen that he time travels to another universe, and then the other Flash from another world comes over, and it's the first time I think DC did it, and it's very similar to this setup of a cover. But yeah, sorry, I'll go on to the next scene.
That's really interesting. So we just have a peek at the cartoon here, so you can see there very, very much a direct inspiration. And honestly, at this point, I think if we're going to get into like canon stuff, I feel like the Archie comics exist with the Saturday morning cartoon stories being a part of that canon, and then it almost kind of overwrites Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog to bring those stories into the canon of the Saturday morning show by including those characters, which, you know, is the case here, and then is the case with the Sonic Spinball one. So that's my own headcanon. Bringing up issue 11 here, I did want to note two things. So we were looking at these covers. If you'll notice, there's a thing called the corner box. So if you look up there under the Archie Adventure series, you see like a little box, and it says Tails Goes Undercover. Now, I don't know the reason for the corner box. I think it's just part of the cover template. But early on, they would just put like stock art in there of Sonic like doing his little finger wave. But early on, they just started doing jokes. So it's almost like a little area for them to do like little gags, or even have characters from the comics like talking to Sonic. So there's Rotor poking his head out and saying, "Chill out, Sonic," while Sonic gets like frozen. Another thing too, if you look at this screenshot that we have up here, you see that big barcode in the corner there. These are the newsstand issues that we're looking at. And if you look at the comics that I have in my collection, there's no barcode. So these are subscriber covers. And it ran for a while.
Which are
so if
worth
you
less,
ever
right?
The subscriber ones?
I was going to say, I think so. I think the newsstand ones with the barcodes, because I've been selling comics lately. I've been trying to get rid of some of my old collectibles, and they said something about how like old Marvel comics used to have like either a Captain America or a barcode, and they're saying the barcode one is usually what collectors want. I don't know if there's a difference. It's the same thing though.
It's hard to say though, but that's a great point, because as I was talking to you about this, I realized it's actually a great way to gauge too where you picked comics up. So, I was talking about that first issue I have. It is a barcode issue, so I very clearly picked this issue up from a newsstand, whereas my issue 2 through issue 12 do not have any barcodes, so I was clearly getting these in the mail. However, after issue 12, with issue 13, they started to put the barcode, but it says direct edition, which means sent directly to the subscribers. So I guess if you look at my collection, I technically have like an incomplete set of... but then again, you have to wonder if the first issue was ever sent to subscribers, because to become a subscriber, you would have to buy the first issue. So the question is there a subscriber cover of Sonic number 1? So, it's these weird little quirks of comic collecting. But yeah, looking at this issue 11 then, this is a big deal just because in this issue, the anti-Sonic appears. So it's the Freedom Fighters witness Robotic dumping toxic waste into a river. Sonic tries taking a shortcut via the Cosmic Interstate, which is kind of like a world between worlds where Sonic can get to other dimensions and stuff, which actually plays a big part later in the comics. But he winds up going to an alternate Mobius where Robotnik is a benevolent doctor and Sonic is the bad guy and he's part of a gang. And what the big deal here is that this evil Sonic is just like Sonic in a like bad guy coat with dark sunglasses, but this character actually, through a series of later appearances, would become green and receive a scar. And if you want to bring up this picture here, he becomes Scourge, who is a kind of a fan favorite and also a character that Ian Flynn wrote a lot about. So honestly, I feel like this issue is really where he started to plant the seeds to tell these stories that would later pay off with characters going down the line. I mean, I don't even want to get into... I'll get into it pretty soon, but where the Robotnik goes from here. But it's just I honestly think it's actually very cool that there are these little like one-off funny jokey stories, but then you look at this character and you realize they have like a couple decades of history and become a green evil Sonic. Like, that's kind of cool, isn't it? I don't know. It makes these early issues actually a lot more interesting to me, because seeds are being planted for stuff that's going to pay off like 10 years down the line.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like they do this a lot in like American comics, right? Where they show a character and they're like, oh yeah, 30 years later, this character is actually this character now. They came back as this person. And I like the idea of like alternative universes, very Flash-like. I always wish that they would do this in the video game, where it's like they kind of did it with Lost World, but it was kind of like, it wasn't like he went to a new version of like, it's not like he showed up at this like new world and then in this world it's like Sonic's world, but it's different, you know, like here he was the bad guy, right? So it would be sick to have like a world where like, I don't know, Amy is the one that's actually the hero and Sonic never existed and it was just a lazy dude. And then, that would be pretty interesting.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. And you also get cases like this too, where very early on these fan favorite characters are introduced and you'd never even think it's them, and then now, like, I'm sure someone sold this on eBay saying first appearance of Scourge the Hedgehog. You know, even though it's a completely different character. It also, I mean, we were talking about Archie first appearing in Pep number 22, and that's kind of funny, but you look back at these old issues and they're like introducing characters like Scourge the Hedgehog, introduced in Sonic number 11. Like, that is just, it's kind of wacky that Sonic has such a history that you can go back to these early issues and see these seeds being planted. Issue 13, if you want to bring that up, what I think just interesting thing about this cover, first off, it is the first appearance of Knuckles. However, the cover itself does anything but promote Sonic and Knuckles. Instead, it's Sonic running a race. And the other weird thing is these officials, now, you know, we haven't been showing too much of the comics here, but humans are a rarity in these early issues. In fact, I don't think you see any humans outside of Robotnik. And yet here on the cover we have what I think is probably the first appearance of humans outside of Robotnik. Just these like two NASCAR guys. I don't know. It's just kind of goofy. And
they look very like... They look very Archie comics, right? Like the art style.
Oh, absolutely. They look like Heathcliff characters, don't they?
Yeah, and now you could calculate how fast Sonic is with the 2.6 seconds. If you're a smart kid, you're like, okay, it's how far is that? You think a lap? Is that like a NASCAR race? How much is that?
How long? How big is a speedway? Daytona Speedway lap distance. Daytona Speedway. It's a 2.5 mile tri-oval lap at Daytona.
Damn.
So maybe 2.5 miles in 2.6 minutes is, what is that? That's like a mile a second. So he's going fast. You kids at home, write in segabits@gmail.com. Tell us, how fast is Sonic, if that's the case? I'm not good at math. But yeah, you can see here then, this next image, this is the first appearance of Knuckles the Echidna, and you see him stomping his foot down and then standing in a spotlight. This issue is interesting because it's very clearly not an adaptation of Sonic and Knuckles. They actually kind of touch on that later on with a special issue. But it kind of... The issue itself is kind of like Sonic and Knuckles. Like, they go to the island and everything, but it's clear that they weren't taking, like, the Ian Flynn direction of treating the games as, like, canon. It was really, like, a very loose adaptation. I mean, here it's kind of loose. You get to Sonic Adventure and, like, it's just off the wall insane. Issue 19.
So you like that? Before we get that, I just want to make a comment about how Knuckles' shoes is the first thing you see. So it's the Lego shoe, right? His iconic Lego shoe. And it's farting. The shoe's farting right here on this page. It says little fart bubbles coming out. And he also doesn't have his Jamaican accent. What's going on, man?
You're ridiculous.
Okay. All right,
Stop this right now.
All right, we'll go to the next one. I'm sorry.
The next one is issue 19. The story in this one's Night of 1,000 Sonics. And this one's actually pretty big for a couple reasons. First off, you see that little, like, weird Sonic next to him with, like, a half a robot face. That's actually, like, the bad guy in the comic. I don't know why he's standing with Sonic there. But there's other ones here. There's a Viking Sonic. You can hardly see him up in the corner. He's covered, but it's a, like, Buddy Holly, like, 1950s guitarist Sonic. And this story, it takes place...
Space Sonic?
Again, Space Sonic, Cowboy Sonic, Mummy Sonic, that's my favorite one. A dimensional doorway has opened in the grazed forest and out pops the Sonic Cyborg. After landing from the cosmic interstate, it seems like this dimension, Dr. Robotnik, turned the Freedom Fighters into cyborgs. But this was a mistake, and the Freedom Fighters became so powerful that they invaded Robotropolis. In an attempt to stop them, Robotnik roboticized himself and became the Robotnik. If he was evil before, now he's worse, and he's set his sights on conquering all dimensions that exist. Thus, a mass recruitment of Sonic and bots begin as Sonic and the real Dr. Robotnik join forces in hopes of stopping Robotnik. So, Robotnik then recruits Evil Sonic, if you remember him, to steal the Giant's Hand from the neutral zone, the key to opening Giant Borg and taking... Like, it's insane. Like, this is probably the most epic issue of Archie Sonic. And who do you think wrote this issue?
Ken
Can you
Penders.
guess?
No. Was it Ken Penders?
Let me tell you. It was Ken Penders. So,
God.
this... I mean, I feel like this is an important one for a few reasons. Number one, it really starts to bring back characters from canon. Number two, it's the very first Ken Penders-y story. Like, it's not his first story, but it's the first one to really feel like Ken Penders flexing his muscles. But the thing is it works. Like, it's a fun story. It utilizes, like, it's only 19 issues in, and we're referencing Evil Sonic from before. We're setting up things that are going to pay off later on. So, spoiler alert, Robotnik. I'm going to see if you know this. All right, so let's do some Sonic trivia with George. Who does Robotnik become later on in the Sonic comics?
I don't know.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know. Can you just let me know, please?
Okay, so Robotnik, through a series of unfortunate events, turns into Dr. Eggman. The Dr. Eggman we know and love from Sonic Adventure onward, modern Eggman. So, I mean, off the top of my head, pretty much what happens is Robotnik from the Sonic comics, you know, this big fat guy with, like, the crazy shirt shoulders. I don't know what he has. He dies. He's dead. He's gone. He dies for good. He never comes back. And what happens is Robotnik's consciousness is uploaded into a backup robot body, and there is a room of different Robotnik bodies, and one of them is the Eggman we know and love. from then on, Robotnik is now Dr. Eggman. He is the new Robotnik in the comic book series moving forward, and then he reverse roboticizes himself and becomes a human. So, I mean, I know this is a show covering kids' comics, but how fucked up is that? That's insane.
Yeah.
And like, who do we thank for that? Ken Penders.
Thank you, sir. I mean, he's writing like stories like Spider-Man stories where villains are like uploading their memories to other people's bodies so they can live on. It's weird. It's very strange. Imagine being a kid and you're like, oh, okay. Now you know multi-universe theory. You know there's a Wolverine Hedgehog out there. I don't know. It's just weird.
Right. I mean, it's absolutely insane, and yet, as I describe it there, it's like the only good way to bring Robotnik back into the series after you kill him off for good. Like, it's just insane. And then next up here, I just want to show this 2-page spread from the Night of 1,000 Sonics. Like, look at this. This is ridiculous. There's Wizard Sonic. There's Boxer Sonic.
Did he do the art too?
No. Ken Penders does do art, but not for this issue. I see Wolverine Sonic, Hulk Sonic, Batman Sonic,
Smoking Sonic.
There's actually 2 astronaut Sonics. Yeah. Oh wait. Oh no, I see. The first panel. It's not a spread, so the first panel is a zoom in on the next scene because Sonic's talking to the same guys. But wow, yeah, that happened. Anyway, let's jump to issue 21. I kind of feel like this is the first Ken Penders-y issue because to me, I never was a big fan of this story, which is kind of a sign of a bad Ken Penders story. And pretty much, let me read you the description here, and you can tell me if you think this sounds like anything that's come before. So the Robotnik unleashes Eve, which stands for Exceptionally Versatile Evolvinoids, to capture Sonic. As Sonic manages to outsmart Eve, it simply adapts to another form to compensate. Sonic lures it to Robotnik's headquarters where, assuming self-conscious form, Eve determines that it is being held back by biological inheritance from Sonic and Robotnik, i.e. individual cells used in Eve's creation. So Eve toasts Robotnik, but thanks to some quick thinking by Sonic, Eve travels out into space on a journey of self-actualization. Like,
okay.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
That seems very much like he's trying to be super deep, I guess. Like he wants to, I don't know, man. Ken Penders is a strange dude. I don't understand him sometimes.
Yeah, and then if you want to jump to the next slide, it gets even weirder. So Eve actually came back way later. So issue number 128, Eve came back in the issue Eve of Destruction, which was during this this long arc where Sonic was floating through space, basically. And which kind of reminds me of the Ninja Turtles, where they were in space for a while. Do you remember those stories?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, they did the whole space stuff, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so Sonic meets up with Eve again. Eve's like hyper evolved. It's just, I mean, on one hand, it's like cool that they went back to Eve. On the other hand, it's a very Ken Penders-y thing. Like, there's nothing Sonic about this to me. It really feels like a concept that he always wanted to put into a comic, so he decided, hey, I'm working on Sonic, might as well throw this in there. Thankfully, issue 25, bring that up. This is a personal favorite of mine. I got it sitting here. Let me find it. Because there's something special about my issue. Here it is. Oh, actually, there isn't. Wait. I guess there isn't. I put it somewhere else. Anyway, my issue number 25 was signed, and I don't know why I don't have the signed one sitting here. But I own 2 copies of it, so I own a signed and unsigned. But what's special about this one is they used foil ink, so it's actually silver around the edges, which is pretty sweet. And again, you see Spaz there. Spaz, I think this is one of his first covers. Oh no, he's done ones before, but like with other artists. This is the first very spazzy cover, and then inside he does the story art too, and it's just I think it's a really cool issue. It's not a straight up adaptation of Sonic CD, but Amy Rose is finally introduced into the comics, even though she doesn't really show up much after this. Metal Sonic is. I mean, you've seen Spaz's art. What do you think about the guy's work?
I think he's really good. I think he's gotten a lot better way. Like, we just tweeted the other day that he was doing the IDW variant, right? And that looks a lot like more advanced. His art's gotten a lot better, obviously, over time. I was gonna say I'm just like going crazy about how this is a foil cover, and it's only $1.50. Yeah. Comics now are like $4, and I've seen some go up to $8.
Right.
As a modern collector, I'm like $150, man. That was the. I mean, I get it. 90s money is way different than today's money, but damn, seeing DC Comics trying to go all the way up to $8 on some issues, it's $150, man. I mean, that's crazy to me.
Right.
Cheap.
It's not bad. It definitely is. Issues 27 and 28. You can see these here. I like the sad Tails. If you look at the newspaper one, there's like a crying Tails photo there. This one's kind of important just because it was a two-parter and it was kind of a big story. So what happened years was, in this one, so it says, for years the Freedom Fighters have relied on Sonic's speed and confidence to get them through the worst situations. But where would they be without their quick-footed friend, or worse yet, if he were fighting for the other side? So in this dramatic two-part tale, Sonic turns on his friends and loses his memory and is tricked by Robotnik to find Knothole and give away its secret location. And so, it was like, it was clear that they started treating Sonic more like a superhero here. It was less jokey. But what I think is really interesting is that you look at that part 2 cover, like, it's still like the kids comic art, but it's a pretty, like, it clashes almost, you know what I mean? Like, it's supposed to be funny, but it doesn't look funny. Like, what's going on here? What do you think about that? Like, do you think that clashes for you? It seems weird, doesn't it?
I think they were trying to, like, mimic, I don't know if you've seen these, but, like, in the past, in the 70s, when they did the Superman comics, would it be like, it'd be like this, they're trying to be funny and they're trying to be kiddie, but like the covers are like really strange. It'd be like Superman trying to boil like Nightwing or something, or Robin, and it'd be like, Batman, you're going crazy, you can't eat Robin, and the kids are supposed to be like, what's this all about? And then they pick up the comic. I think this is where they're trying to mimic. And I don't know, I just really love the way Sonic looks. He's so happy to watch the Freedom Fighters get destroyed. He's like, his face is like a kid. Last slice of pizza for him, you know? But yeah, I like it. I like it personally. Because it reminds me of the old comics.
I want to point out, too, the issue 27 cover was actually penciled by Ken Penders. Because if you read the newspaper comic behind them, it says, writer Ken Penders reports, I will pencil the cover of Sonic number 27. And John DeAgostino replies, and I will ink your pencils. And John, I believe, was another writer. So it was like they were having the writers illustrate the cover, which is kind of weird. I don't know. I don't think Penders is that.
Yeah, it's the worst cover that we've seen, though.
Yeah. Now, if you want to see a pretty sweet cover, let's skip to issue 29. Look at that. So that's Spaz going full on Spaz for his covers. I really love the detail. Like, this is Princess Sally morphing into a robot. You can see the characters looking behind the tube. They're a little, like, distorted. I think the colors look nice. Like, all in all, it's very much unlike, like, it seems like such, issue 29. Look at number 1 compared to that. Like, it's very different. Sonic has become a very different comic, and it's almost like you can't go back. You can't go back to this, like, jokey style anymore. It doesn't work. And I think I don't know if it was issue 29 where they decided to do this switch, but I think they kind of decided here that Spaz should be their cover guy, because it kind of matches the tone and direction that the series is going, just by telling stories that are a little more serious, even though when you go inside the issue, they're still jokey, And if you want to bring up the next picture, here we have Robot Sally. You see that gal?
Oh,
and
yeah.
I have here, so I'm going to show some of these off in a little bit, but I have that original art right here. So we can see...
Touch it, smear it.
I do touch it, actually. I don't wear gloves. I'm a bad guy. But it's just cool. I've got it. Rich Kozlowski, I believe he inked these. He was selling them at a comic show, so he signed that there for me. And yeah, so I think that's kind of cool. Little piece of history, Sonic history. And
how much you pay for that?
The art was actually not much. So I bought these at comic shows back in the mid '90s when the comics were. I think they were actually probably. Man, I don't know what they were up to at this. So this was number 29. I think Sonic was still. They still had issues 25 for sale at their booth, so it was probably in the mid 30s by this point. No, I'm going to correct myself. I think they were probably in the 60s because they had issue 50 art for sale. But like, that's sweet, isn't it? It's the first appearance of Robot Sally, and I probably got it for like $30. Nothing. Cheap.
Very good.
And the art for that was done by Art Mahini, who's actually like my least favorite, just because I always felt like his art kind of reminded me
Did
of
you tell him
children's
that?
books. No. I mean, I don't hate it, but like you look at the art, it kind of reminds me of oh man, who's that guy who does animation, but he's not Disney? He does his own thing. Don Bluth. Like, it's got a very Don Bluth. Like, Robotnik's very, like, doughy, and everyone's kind of plump. I don't know. But I picked that one up just because I knew Robot Sally was kind of a big event. And it's cool. In the margins, it says, like, Evil Sally, and it has notes about it. And in that issue, too, it was a big deal because it was the first time a freedom fighter was successfully roboticized, which became a plot device later on in issue number 39. If you want to get up to issue 35 here, this one's pretty sweet. I like this cover. So this one's kind of a big deal just because it introduces these things called the Ancient Walkers. So basically what happens is Sonic collects his 1 billionth ring, and a mysterious ancient group of people called the Ancient Walkers, who were originally appearing in the Tales miniseries, take Sonic on a cosmic journey to learn about the secret of the rings and Chaos Emeralds. And by the end of it, Sonic has more questions than he does answers. But I always felt like this was a big deal issue just because they talk about the secrets of the rings and the emeralds. I felt like these dudes kind of reminded me of all of those totem poles you would see in Sonic 1. Like, it very clearly is picking up on some ancient culture in Sonic's world. What do you think about that? Like, that concept as a story?
If I was a kid and somebody in the playground told me there's this comic book and there's ancient walkers, right? And Sonic, and I would be like, oh, obviously the ancient walkers are Sonic's nemesis because Sonic hates walking. Old people walking are the slowest. Everyone knows. So that's what I would think.
You're done.
Of course I'm an idiot. I mean, I'm not going to argue that one. But as for that, I like the idea of the Secret of the Ring. This is a nice prequel to The Secret of the Ring on the Wii, obviously, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. As far as that, they have. I like the ancient look. Obviously, it's pretty good. Like, I agree with you. It does go with the old Genesis art.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the artwork inside too. You can see a panel here. So this is the first appearance of Robotnik's like wrecking ball machine. I don't think it was ever within the comics until this issue. And the reason, again, why I bring up this specific
and you have art
is, and this is probably my favorite,
Fucking
I have this page. So you can see here, it's Sonic with the rings being absorbed into the zone, the wrecking ball, and then Sonic collecting his ring. And then, I've got the signature there again. And it goes even further. I actually just recently, a couple months ago, picked up more original art from this issue. So these are from Barry Grossman, who was the colorist. And what they would do is they would scan these big issues in to the smaller size, almost like, it's almost comic-sized, I think, maybe a little smaller. Yeah, you can see that there. It's a little smaller than the comic. And what he would do is he would actually go through with like nice markers and color these. So this is all hand-colored, and this would get sent to the, like the printer that would actually use, I think, computers to color these and make them match what you would see here. And it's really beautiful work. Like you can see on the video, like he would color the rings multiple colors to give them a little bit of a shine. You can see there's a lake of chaos emeralds there, green emeralds. And then on another one, you can see completely different color scheme. It's almost like a special stage background there.
It's crazy to me that that he shrunk it to color it. That's crazy to me.
I guess just to use less ink, Like if you're going to do it, you have to do it at a size that they can read. And then also he would, in pencil, reference every single color. So every single color has a print equivalent. So he would tell them what kind to use. And often he would just draw right on top of it. But yeah, it's really, really nicely done. And I did not spend much on these. I think I was getting these for like $10 a page, maybe, if less. And I have more too that I'll show off pretty quick.
Belongs in a museum.
Well, that's the thing. I saw him posting these, and I bought up as many as I could. But there's still some for sale. They're a little more expensive now. I checked his sale history. Thankfully, he never sold the one that I have the inks of. Otherwise, I'd be kicking myself because it would be so cool to have like the final comic, the color guide, and then the inks, like the entire process. Maybe someday it'll show up. But
oh yeah,
I did want to wrap things up here, at least for this original era of Sonic comics, with issue number 38. And issue 38, I mean, there's nothing too special about it. They're coming off from a victory at Robotropolis for an earthquake. They're enjoying a routine mission. Freak lightning bolt zaps Sonic and causes him to lose his speed, which seems to happen every other issue. And then the Freedom Fighters try to manage without Sonic's powers and find some Sonic substitutes. It's kind of your basic issue. But then when issue 39 comes about, I really feel like it was a change, maybe for the better for the series. And you can see that here, issue 39, it says Mecca Madness starts here. And this was when I feel like Ken Penders really started laying the foundation for ongoing arcs and setting up for what would eventually become Endgame, which was leading up to issue 50. There was stuff going on here. Sonic gets roboticized. That's what you're seeing on the cover. And then there was an issue where Knuckles fights him, and that was a special issue called Mecca Madness. It was, I mean, I think Spaz did some of his best art in this era. I think Ken Penders did some of his best plotting, which I think, I don't hate the guy. I think he did some great work. But it's really the end of an era, too. Because you're not going to see stories where Sonic's, like, sniffing flowers and he gets, like, bloated. Or characters seem to have a lot more menace to them. It used to be they would share a scene with Robotnik, and then, like, he would just let them walk away. And now it's like, if you're in the same room with Robotnik, he's going to, like, pull a gun and shoot you in the head. It's like he's a scary dude now. So that kind of, at least, in terms of talking about this, the comics, wraps things up. What do you think about that? What do you think about that transition? Did it seem, I mean, you haven't read them all, But just going through these with me, do you kind of see how it changed into what it became?
Yeah, I mean, they got Ken Penders, and he's a little out there, right? The guy is eccentric. The guy has a mustache. The guy is better than us, obviously. I mean, we didn't write any Sonic issues, so mad respect for the guy. I think it's funny that all the fans troll him, and they think he's like the worst thing ever. I think parts of him and aspects of the man are bad, like taking stuff a little too seriously. But like you said, obviously there's fans also that liked his early plotting. I think he fell off the wagon after a while, and it was time for him to move on. But like you said, you enjoyed the early comics, and that's always going to be part of his legacy, right? Maybe in 50 years, when people look back at these comics, they're going to forget the crazy Kim Benders era where he sued SEGA and didn't let anyone use the knuckles with the fedora, you know?
Right, exactly. You know, he had his good moments, and we'll revisit Ken, I don't know, maybe in the next few months we'll do a part 2 to this. But in the meantime, I just want to give a shout out to Michael Gallagher and the original staff of the Sonic the Hedgehog comics. I mean, I don't think I would be the big Sonic fan that I am without these, as evidenced by all the all the stuff that I would buy up from former artists and staffers. So to close things out, I just wanted to go through a few more pieces of original art. Not too much here, but just some more of those color guides. So these are from issue number 34, which we did not touch on, but just some cool stuff. I picked this one up just because it's Robotnik in front of a SWAT bot army, and just the detail that he went into for every single one I thought was kind of impressive. And then we've got some cool stuff here going on with Sonic's Uncle Chuck. They're getting electrocuted. I thought there was some cool color work there. Yeah.
When's Uncle Chuck? He's basically he's like the Sopranos. He's like Uncle, what's his name? His uncle from the Sopranos. That's it, Uncle Chuck.
Uncle Junior.
Uncle Junior.
Uncle June.
The best character.
There's also a bit of behind the scenes here. So this is a fan art, and then what he would do in this case is they would scan in the fan art, and then he would do the color guide. So he was actually coloring kids' fan art, and then he would overlay on top of it the printer stuff. And then I thought these were cool. So the letter section is called Sonic Grams, and again, no one was buying this. This was kind of an unpopular item on Barry Grossman's eBay page, but I thought it was really cool just to get a look at how you would do a color guide for a letters page. And there's a little drawing here. So they would do these things called off-panel, and they ran for quite a long time, actually. And it was like little behind-the-scenes stories, and typically done in the Archie art style. And it would be in-jokes with the staff, commenting on, fans or just inter-office politics. There's also something really cool here on the second page of the art. So you can see here, there's just a nice little Knuckles clip art there that they colored. And then this is interesting. Even though I don't own the cover for issue 35, I have the coming soon. So there's the cover for the issue I own some art for. So, it's a cool little piece of history to have, and all you kids at home can be happy that I own it and not someone who would never show it to you. Sitting on it.
They're probably going to be thinking to themselves, I wish I owned it.
Visually give. Well, maybe when I die, I'll sell it to you. Wait, I'd be dead.
Yeah, that'd be impossible.
But I don't want to close this episode out on me dying. But yeah, I don't really have any final thoughts here. I guess I'd just say go out, check these out. There aren't any printed compilations, unfortunately, so pirate them. I hate suggesting that, but that's the only way you're going to find them unless you go out and buy reprints. The best reprints, though, that do exist are, I think, the Sonic Archives. They never covered the whole issues, though, and it's a headache to even try to explain how many versions of reprints there are. there's no way you're ever going to get reprints of the whole series. So hopefully IDW steps up. Is there anything you wanted to say, George, before we wrap things up and close the comic book on Sonic the early years?
I was going to say that I'm going to be doing the next episode for the Sonic month, since it's 30th anniversary. We're going to be covering Sonic Adventure 2. So if you guys have any memories of Sonic Adventure 2, it'd probably be pretty good to go on our Patreon and donate a couple bucks our way, and then you could have your memories in the end of the episode. And I don't know, if you guys pay more, maybe we could put them in the front of the episode. I don't know. We could talk about it. But Sonic Adventure 2 is the next game we're going to be talking about. Wow. We also did Sonic Adventure 1 already, so if you guys want to check out that episode, it's in our archive somewhere. And that's it. That's all I have to say.
All right. And then, of course, if you are a backer at any level, you can leave your memories and then have them read at the end of the show. A little something special on this one. So, longtime Patreon supporter and episode picker Tyler messaged me, and he said, "Can I leave a voicemail?" And I said, "Well, you can, but keep it short." And he sent me, I told him to send me a minute, and he sent me 6. I told him I'd edit it down. I never got around to editing it down. So you know what? As a little treat to him, I'm going to play his voicemail in full at the end of the show. So if you want to stick around and listen to it, you can do that. So let's pop in the cassette tape and play Tyler's final thoughts.
Hey there, George and Barry. Thanks again for letting me do this. I'm trying to keep this as short as I can. And please, if you want to, you can edit this recording however you'd like to, if you have enough time to do that. But I'll try to keep it short. Okay, so thanks again, George and Barry, for letting me express my voice about my memories. I just wanted to say that for the Sonic Archie comic universe, it's probably my favorite universe in the Sonic franchise. Maybe next to the games, obviously. I know at times it can be a little bizarre and weird and kind of cringy at times, but what they did for this universe was really, really out of the unexpected. It's crazy how much lore and depth the Sonic Archie comics have and how much they put into it. They didn't need to put as much as they did into it. But I specifically remember when I was I was 9. I was 9 years old when I found my first issue, and this has nothing to do with the first 15 issues, unfortunately, which I know you guys are heavily focusing on that in this video, but or in this podcast episode. But I saw it at a grocery store when I was in the Elk Rapids area here in Michigan, with my parents, and it was some random issue. On the front cover, Sonic was in a pool of water with his head above water, I think. I don't remember which issue number it was, but it was somewhere in the 150s or 140s. And it was, I remember there was these weird aliens that came in the same issue. They were these giant purple tentacle alien octopus creatures. But this is the first time I think I ever saw the Freedom Fighters. I saw Sally, Antoine, Rotor, Bunny, all these random characters in this comic. And I'm like, who are these guys? Why are they in the games and stuff? What's going on here? And so it opened up a whole new world for Sonic comics for me. It was either that when I first saw the characters, or it was Sonic Set AM. I remember with my parents, one evening, I wanted to see the Sonic movie, and I was hoping, me and my dad, he was going to go rent it for me from Blockbuster one night, and he came back with an episode compilation of Sonic Set AM instead. So I watched that, and I was like, this isn't the Sonic movie, but this is interesting. I don't remember when I first saw the Freedom Fighter specifically, the Sonic Archie comic characters. It might have been from the comics, it might have been from the show, it might have been online, I don't know. But my point is that it opened up this whole new world, and then I just got really into the comics. I tried to after that. I don't have every issue, but I have random issues. I have most of the archives. But yeah, issues 1 through 15 were kind of they were more lighthearted, a little corny. I'm not a big fan of the writing, I'm sorry. It's kind of to me, it's the same kind of writing as the Ken and Pontac writing that we had in Sonic Colors, Lost World Forces. But I will say that the Archie comics definitely did their jokes better. I think their jokes are actually a lot more fun than what Ken and Pontac gave us. They had their jokes are very 90s culture at times, but that if you grew up in that era, if you understand the era, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, I think for the most part, it's fine. But I'm a fan of like when things got more serious. It's unfortunate Ken Penders turned out to be the person that he is, but I'm not sure how responsible he is for like the Sonic comics being as big as they were, but I know that he definitely had a big hand in like issues 25 to 50. Those are some of my favorite comics. I mean, issue 50 is probably my favorite Sonic comic ever. I know that ending bit became a bit of a meme now, but I loved the Sonic versus Robotic fight. That was a big freaking deal to me when I first saw that. That was so epic, and it was just so right, like just the way that was, and it blew my mind. I was like, I want to say I was like 16 or 17. I know I wasn't too young when I saw that, but I was still a teen when I saw that. I just saw the issue, I think somewhere out when me and my parents were on a trip. I picked it up. I think it was in Chicago when I saw this issue. But yeah, I love the comics. I'm just trying to give out some highlights of like big impactful moments. I remember when I first saw Scourge and Enerjack, and they're a big deal. And Ix's Naugus, what an incredible villain of a character. Oh my god. And Mammoth Magall, he's a big deal. And I'm telling you, like, there's so many great characters, so much expansive lore and history and everything. And it's a shame that this universe is just kind of gone now and it never got a proper closure. And hopefully, actually, I think it kind of did. I think the fans kind of finished it. So, never mind, actually. But, yeah, I love the comics. They've always meant a lot to me. And I'm just really happy to see that we still have some form of Sonic comics going on today with IDW. So, that's great. That's great. So, and I love that's a sequel to the games. And I'm really hoping we get to see Tangle and Whisper in, like, the next Sonic game, which... seeing what it is, we might not, and that's kind of unfortunate because it should be a sequel to the comics and Forests. Forest isn't in the comics, it should be, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, guys, thanks for listening. I'm sorry this was a little bit longer than maybe you're hoping, but thanks again for letting me share my memories. And the Sonic comics, they mean so much to me, and I cannot wait to share them with my kid when she's like a little bit older and whatnot. But yeah, it's a big universe. So with that being said, long live Sonic Comics in some kind of way, shape, or form, and keep on reading, guys. Thanks again.